Healing power. The power of self-healing is buried in the tomb of every human life. By uncovering the potentials of that power, one can heal oneself. A completely selfless man of God can heal anyone. The highest of all healings is to attain freedom from all miseries. My first exposure to the power of healing. When I was 12 years of age, I was traveling by foot with my master through the plains of India. We stopped at a railway station in Etah, where my master went to the station master and said, "My child is with me, and he is hungry. Please give us some food." The station master went to his home for food, but when he arrived, his wife cried, "You know that our only son is suffering from smallpox. How can you be concerned about giving food for these wandering sadhus? My son is dying. Get out of this house. I am in distress." He returned with a long face and apologized. "What can I do? My wife says, if he is a real Swami, why doesn't he realize our situation and cure our child? Doesn't he have any sense? Our only child is on his deathbed, and he's worried about a food offering?" My master smiled and told me to follow him. We went to the station master's home. It was a challenge, and he always enjoyed being challenged. But I complained, "I am hungry. When are we going to eat?" He said, "You will have to wait." This was a frequent complaint of mine. Often I used to cry, "You don't give me food in time." I would run away weeping. But he was teaching me to have patience. He said, "You are disturbed right now. Wait for 5 minutes and you won't be disturbed at all. In this situation it is right to wait." But I continued to complain, and the woman wanted to chase me from her house. It was the first time I had seen someone suffering from smallpox. The boy had big abscesses all over his body, even on his face, and pus was issuing from them. My master said to the parents, "Don't worry. In 2 minutes your son will be completely well." He took a glass of water and walked around the cot on which the boy was lying. He did this 3 times. He then drank the water. Then he looked at the woman and said, "He's getting well, don't you see?" To our amazement, the abscesses began to disappear from the boy. But to my dismay, at the same time they began to appear on my master's face. I was terrified and I started to cry. He calmly said, "Don't worry, nothing will happen to me." Within 2 minutes the child's face was perfectly clear, and we left the house. I followed my master until he came to a banyan tree. He sat under the tree, and soon the abscesses began to disappear from him and then to appear on the tree. After 10 minutes they also disappeared from the tree. When I saw that my master was all right, I hugged him and wept. "Don't do that again," I pleaded. "You didn't look nice and it frightened me." Then many people started searching for us. I asked, "Have we done anything bad?" He said, "No, come with me." He held my hand and we started walking again on the bank of the Yamuna River. Finally we stopped at another house and were given some food. We then went to an enclosed courtyard where no one would find us and took our meal and rested. The sages find pleasure in suffering to help others. This is beyond the conception of the ordinary mind. Human history has provided many instances of spiritual leaders who suffered for others. Such sages become examples, and many people even today follow in the footsteps of such great people. When individual consciousness expands itself to cosmic consciousness, it becomes easy to feel delight in suffering for the sake of others. For them it is not suffering, though the ordinary people think that they are suffering. When one's consciousness remains limited to the individual boundaries only, then the individual suffers. A great man does not suffer when something happens to his own self, but feels more pain in the suffering of others. Pain and pleasure are a pair of opposites, experienced when the senses contact objects of the world. Those whose consciousness has expanded beyond the sensory level get freedom from this pair of opposites. There are techniques for voluntary withdrawing the mind from the senses and focusing inwards to reveal the center of consciousness. In such a state of mind, one is not affected by sensory pleasure or pain. Such a one-pointed mind also creates a dynamic will which can be used for healing others. All such healing powers flow through the human being from the one source of consciousness. The moment the healer becomes conscious of his individuality, that spontaneous flow of healing power stops. Healing is a natural power in man. The healing of others is possible through that willpower which is not interrupted by the lower mind. My master sends me to heal someone. One fine morning, my master and I were sitting outside our cave, when suddenly he said, "You have to catch a bus. The bus route is 7 miles from here, so hurry up." He often told me to get up and go somewhere on the spur of the moment. Sometimes I wouldn't know why, but I would find out when I reached there. I rose and picked up a pot of water that I always carried. He said, "Take the bus to Hardwar railroad station. You'll get a ticket, and from there go to Kanpur. Dr. Mitra is bedridden and is constantly remembering me. He is having a brain hemorrhage and is bleeding out of his right nostril, but his wife will not allow him to go to the hospital. His brother-in-law, Dr. Basu, knows that it is a hemorrhage, but there are no facilities there to perform brain surgery." I asked, "What shall I do?" "Just give him a love pat on the cheek. Don't consider yourself a healer. Think that you are an instrument, and go there, for I have promised him and his wife that we will always help him. Go as quickly as you can." I said, "I'm surprised to find that you make promises on my behalf, without my knowledge." I was reluctant to go on such a long journey, but I could not disobey. I went to the bus route, which was 7 miles away from the cave, and stood by the side of the road until the bus for Rishikesh or Hardwar picked me up. The drivers would always give a Swami a ride when they saw one on the roadside. I got off the bus at the railroad station at Hardwar with no money, but I had only half an hour until the train was to leave for Kanpur. I looked at my watch and thought I might be able to sell it to buy a ticket. Approaching a gentleman at the railway station, I asked if I could exchange my watch with him for the money to buy a ticket. Surprisingly, he said, "My son could not come with me, so I have an extra ticket. Please take it. I don't need your watch." I got into the train and met a lady who was going to Kanpur and who was a close relative of Dr. Mitra. She had heard about me and my master from Dr. Mitra and his wife, and she gave me something to eat. We traveled all night and in the morning the train arrived at Kanpur. There was so much rush at the railway station that it took me 10 minutes to get through the gate. Outside the station, I suddenly met a man who knew me well. He had his car parked nearby and had been waiting for someone, but that person never turned up. He had missed his train at Delhi. This man wanted to drive me to his house, but I insisted that we go to Dr. Mitra's instead. When we reached there, I knocked on the door and entered to find 3 doctors examining Dr. Mitra. Mrs. Mitra was delighted to see me and said, "Now that you have come, I hand over my husband to you." This is called Indian blind faith in sadhus. I said, "I am not a healer. I have just come to see him." I went over to Dr. Mitra's bed, but he was not allowed to sit up because of the bleeding from his nostril. When he saw me, he asked, "How is my master?" I gave him the gentle pat on his right cheek. After a few minutes, there was no more bleeding. One of the doctors explained that the slap which I had given him on the cheek closed the opening in the blood vessel, and that it was now sealed. I did not know what I had done, but I followed my master's instructions. Dr. Mitra's sudden recovery quickly became the talk of the town, and hundreds of patients started searching for me. So I left the city later that day and reached Hardwar the next morning. From there, I went to the place where my master was staying. I told my master teasingly, "I know the secret and can stop a hemorrhage in anyone." He laughed at me and said, "The doctor who gave you that explanation is quite ignorant. There are various modes and levels of suffering, but ignorance is the mother of all." On several occasions I had to leave suddenly, according to my master's instructions, without having any knowledge of my purpose and destination. I had many experiences like this. I came to the conclusion that the ways of sages are mysterious and beyond the ability of ordinary minds to understand. I would just do and then experience. Experience would give me knowledge. One who is free from the conditionings of the mind knows past, present, and future alike. These conditionings are called time, space, and causation. The ordinary mind cannot fathom these conditionings, but the great men do. It becomes difficult for ordinary men to understand this science, but it does not take extraordinary ability for those who are on the path. I once asked my master, "Is it possible for a man in the world to get freedom from all conditionings of mind, or does he have to live in the Himalayas his whole life to develop powers such as yours?" He said, "If a human being remains constantly aware of the purpose of his life and directs all his actions toward the fulfillment of that purpose, there remains nothing impossible for him. Those who are not aware of the purpose of life are easily caught by the whirlpool of miseries. It is a law that one cannot live without doing his duties, but it is also true that duties make the doer a slave. If the duties are performed skillfully and selflessly, then the duties do not bind the doer. All actions and duties performed with love become means in the path of liberation. Performing one's duty is very important, but more important is love, without which duty creates bondage. Fortunate is he who serves others selflessly and learns to cross this mire of delusion. A human being is fully equipped with all necessary healing powers, but does not know their usage. The moment he comes in touch with the healing potentials within, he can heal himself. All the powers belong to only one God. A human being is only an instrument. Unorthodox ways of healing. The belief in possession is as old as the oldest cultures. We still hear that such and such a person is possessed by a demon or ghost or spirit. From 1960 to the present, in my extensive travels all over the world, I have found that not only ignorant people, but also educated priests believe in the reality of possessions. But this possession is just a mental imbalance. It is possible to treat such cases with religious rituals and ceremonies. In most communities of the world, such rituals are still practiced, though sometimes clandestinely. In most of the cases which I had an opportunity to examine, the problem was hysteria, usually created by the repression of sexual urges. There are other causes, such as pathological fear of losing something, or of not being able to obtain something that is desperately desired. There are certain places in India where patients are brought to be freed from a possession. The therapists use crude methods, including whipping the patient before an idol. During the treatment, one of the therapists, called a Vakya, comes forward as though he were also possessed, but by a deva, meaning good spirit. Sometimes, while in a highly concentrated state of emotion, the Vakya jumps into the flames of fire to prove how mighty his powers are. Then, chanting hymns, he tries to aid the patient out of his condition. There are many such practitioners scattered throughout the Himalayan mountains. A few years ago, Dr. Elmer Green, Alice Green, and some of their colleagues from the Menninger Foundation came to India with sensitive psychological instruments to examine yogis. They visited my ashram, situated on a bank of the Ganges at Rishikesh. They arrived a year later than originally planned, however, and could not contact the yogis who had agreed to come to the ashram for the experiments. I had appointed a man named Hari Singh to serve as a watchman, and he offered himself as a subject for one of the experiments. There were 40 American observers, including doctors and psychologists who were staying in my ashram at that time. A movie maker from the United States, who had accompanied Dr. Green's party, started his camera as Hari Singh put a steel blade in a fire. When it became red hot, Hari Singh pulled it from the fire and licked it with his tongue. There was a hissing sound and vapor arose, but nothing happened to his tongue. It was not burned or scarred in any way. Such phenomenon are often performed by non-yogis, and people then consider them to be yogis. Out of curiosity, Westerners frequently go to India and to the Himalayan foothills to find such people. The phenomena are common enough and genuine, but they are not part of yoga and are not taught in the yoga schools. Once, in 1945, a neurologist from Australia came to see me at my mountain home and stayed with me for 10 days. There were a few hospitals or dispensaries in the mountains 30 years ago. Although the Indian government is now trying to build treatment centers here and there to treat minor health complications, I had hoped that this man could come help the villagers by prescribing a few medicines. But his reason for coming to the Himalayas to see me was to find a way to get rid of his severe chronic headaches, which prevented him from leading a normal life. Although he was a doctor himself, and had been examined by many other doctors, he could not find the cause of the headaches, and no one had been able to successfully treat him. An old woman who used to bring milk to my cabin smiled when she saw him and said, "Is he a doctor?" She laughed and said to me, "If I am permitted, I can remove his headache in 2 minutes' time." I said, "Please try." She brought one of the herbs that is well known and widely used in the mountains for making fire. A spark made by friction between two rocks ignites the herb. She crushed the herb and put a bit of it on the doctor's right temple and said, "Believe me, you will be free from headaches forever. Lie down." When he did so, she placed an iron hook in the fire and heated the point until it was red. Then she put the red-hot point onto the herb which had been placed on the temple. The doctor screamed and jumped up. I also was shocked. The woman calmly returned to her village, and the doctor's headaches were gone. Such treatments are often used by the villagers. The doctor said, "Which science is this? I want to learn more about it." I did not encourage him, for, although I believe that occasionally such treatments may help, they are not systematic, and it is very difficult to evaluate which ones are truly effective and which are only a matter of superstition. The doctor persisted, though, and left for the Garhwal Mountains, where he studied under a mountain medicine man, Vaidya Bhairadat, who knew more than 3,000 varieties of herbs. When the doctor met me again 6 months later, he reported, "I know the explanations of that treatment which I received from the old lady. It is based on the principles which were used by travelers who went across the Tibetan border to China, and which have been systematized as acupuncture." Charaka, the ancient Indian master of medicine, mentions it as Suchi Vedha, Susi in modern Hindi, the needle-pricking treatment. I concluded that he had been relieved of one kind of headache, but was now creating a new headache for himself by investigating these cures. There are many things known to the villagers which work, but we would be wise not to adopt them until we understand their underlying principles. We must keep an open mind. Herbs and medicines prepared from metals are not in common use in the West today. Although we have many modern means to prepare drugs, which do help patients, drugs cannot be the remedy for all diseases. Ayurvedic treatment uses herbs and many other methods of treatment. Water therapy, clay therapy, steam therapy, color therapy, sun baths, and the use of juices of various fruits, flowers, and vegetables are essential components of Ayurvedic therapy. The Ayurvedic method of treating disease is divided into two sections, Nidana and Pathya. Therapists prescribe changes in eating, sleeping, and even climate instead of putting patients in the terrifying conditions that we often find in crowded modern hospitals. I have often wondered how it is possible for the people of the Himalayas to remain so healthy and have such longevity, though they enjoy very few of the benefits of modern medicine. There are many diseases for which modern medical science has not discovered a remedy, but these mountaineers do not even suffer from these. Perhaps fresh food, fresh air, and above all, free thinking with no anxiety is responsible for their health. Millions of patients all over the world who suffer from psychosomatic diseases can be helped through the right diet, juices, relaxation, breathing, and meditation. Preventative and alternative medicine should not be ignored. Healing in a Himalayan shrine. A party of businessmen and a few doctors decided to visit the shrine of Badrinath in the Himalayas. Mr. Jaipuria, a prominent businessman from Kanpur, organized this pilgrimage, and Dr. Sharma went along to serve as health custodian to the 40 people in the party. They persisted that I go with them to teach the group. With the exception of the organizer, who was carried in a palanquin, we went on foot from Kamprayag, and after several days' journey we reached Badrinath. By that time, since they were not used to walking on foot in the mountain, all the members of the party were worn and tired, and were suffering from aches and pains, especially from swollen knee joints. Upon reaching Badrinath, everyone rushed for a bath in the hot springs. The sun was about to go to bed, and my room was on a quiet side of a very big building, where there lived many travelers who had come to visit this shrine. I was in the habit of remaining awake at night and taking my rest from 1 o'clock to 3:30 in the afternoon. This habit has become a part of my life. At 2:30 in the morning somebody knocked on my door and said, "Swamiji, please come out. My brother is suffering from a severe heart attack, and the doctors cannot handle it. Please help now." It was Mr. Jaipuria, who loves me very much, but I strictly maintain that early period of the morning for meditation, and this distraction was a disturbance to my willpower. I also knew that there were several doctors there with oxygen and medical kits, so rather than open the door, I said from inside, "We yogis and swamis aspire to die in a place like this, and it never happens. How can it be possible for your brother to have chosen such an auspicious place to die?" "It is not possible. He is not dying. Go away and don't disturb me." I found Jaipuria's brother quite normal in the morning. This retort of mine became a joke among the businessmen. If the holy men are not fortunate enough to die in a shrine like Badrinath, how is it possible for businessmen to have such a peaceful death? It's not possible. The next morning everyone went to the shrine and met many swamis who lived in nearby caves. At 5 o'clock in the evening I was informed by Dr. Sharma, the head physician of the party, that Mrs. Jaipuria was suffering from bloody diarrhea. She was a fine little old lady who always looked after my comforts. I used to call her mother. I felt sad and rushed to see her. Her face was very pale, and she was so completely exhausted that she could only move her lips. Her 2 sons, who were sitting next to her, did not believe that the old lady was going to live. The doctor gave her medications, but nothing happened. Her breath was very shallow, and the doctors declared her case hopeless. I put my hand over her head in sympathy. I did not know what to do. Suddenly I turned my head and found a tall young Swami calling my name, and my attention was diverted toward him. This Swami said, "Where is the doctor?" And the doctor came forward. The Swami said, "That's all your medical science can do? "You people are really killing people and drugging them. What poor knowledge!" The doctor was annoyed and told him, "How is it that you two Swamis cannot heal her? I accept that I have failed, and that the other doctors have also failed." Mr. Jaipuria loved his wife immensely, and was sobbing in a corner of the room. His sons and in-laws were also crying. I looked at the young Swami, and he smiled and asked if there were a flower he could have. Here, people carry flowers to offer at the shrine, and someone came forward with the red petals of roses. The Swami told Mrs. Jaipuria to get up. He roughly pulled her arm, forcibly made her sit, and poured a glass of water containing the petals in her mouth while muttering something that nobody knew. He then laid her on the bed, covered her with the blanket, and told all the people to get out of the room, saying, "She will be going into a deep sleep now." Everyone thought that deep sleep meant dying, and they started screaming and crying. We were both smiling at them. This was not at all appreciated by them, and the old lady's son said, "You irresponsible people have nothing to lose, but I have lost my mother, and now you are making fun of us." The young Swami and I stood outside that house and waited for the woman to wake up. Her family members were preparing for her cremation. After half an hour, the young Swami asked Mr. Jaipura to go inside the room and be with his wife. He found her sitting up and in perfectly good health. I am not against medicines and remedies which help in curing diseases, but I love to make others aware of preventative medicine. There is another, higher way of helping people through the use of willpower. Willpower here means that dynamic will which is created by a one-pointed mind, meditation and spiritual discipline. In today's medicine, this cultivation of willpower is totally missing. The young Swami accepted the doctor's challenge and became aware of his potential to heal the suffering old lady. My experience with many medical professionals has convinced me that in treating diseases, the doctor's behavior and use of willpower is more important than mere medication. The more the medical profession understands this fact, the more they will agree with me that they can help humanity not only by using medicine, but also by teaching certain methods of prevention. In this way, more patients can be made aware of their inner capacities to heal themselves. No one can believe how much the whole party then adored us, and how everybody wanted to give us money, build houses, and present us with cars. We both smiled and laughed at them. I found out that rich people want to pay for everything with coins, and that they even try to bribe renunciates. But for those who are truly on the path of renunciation, riches cannot tempt them. Those who are already treading the path like to be poor materially, but rich spiritually. When they compare these higher riches to mere worldly riches, they will not be held back by these charms, temptations, and attractions which can obstruct the way of a renunciate. Beginners who aspire to lead an austere life and follow the path of renunciation often become the victims of such temptations. Some suffer a setback, or may even become mentally deranged. The pleasures of the world are no doubt powerful. Attachment to these pleasures is considered to be the mother of all ignorance. A one-pointed mind, a strong will, and above all, the grace of God help a fortunate few to remain above temptation, unaffected by these worldly fetters. I bade good-bye to the members of the party with whom I had visited the shrine of Badrinath. I stayed back with my friend to listen to the music played by the great sage called Parvatikar Maharaja. We stayed another 6 days in the cave of Palaria Baba, who was known by this name because he lived only on fruits and milk, and came down to the shrine to listen to the sage every evening. His instrument was the Bichitra Veena, which has several things. There was a crowd of 500 people sitting in the corridor of his shrine. Before he started tuning his instrument, he broke the silence and said, "Blessed ones, I am tuning my instrument, and you can tune yours. The chords of life should be tuned properly. It is an art to tune the chords first, and then to hold the instrument in a comfortable and steady way. Let you be instruments now. Let him play through you. Just surrender yourself. Offer this tuned instrument of yours to the musician." Some people understood him, others not. I and my other friend were quietly sitting in a corner, and we became attentive after listening to his words. He held his veena in his arms, closed his eyes, and started playing on it. If the sitar and guitar, along with all string instruments, were played together harmoniously, they could not create such a beautiful melody. The audience did not know the music, yet everyone was swaying. He played his instruments for 2.5 hours. He was one musician who really helped me believe that music could be a means for peace and joy. I call it meditation in music. Among all the fine arts, the finest is music. Music is not composed of songs, melodies, or words only, but of the most subtle sound, nada, the vibration that spontaneously inspires all the cells and makes them dance. There could be no dance without the vibrations of nada. Because of this nada, the stream of life sings with a particular rhythm and flows through various curves of life, giving its environment a new experience every time. The most ancient traveler of this universe is this stream of life that sings and dances in its joy from eternity to eternity. In the ecstasy of meeting the beloved, it finally unites with the ocean of bliss. From beginning to end, there is a perennial sound, but on various pitches, which make 7 key notes. In music all over the world, there are 7 key notes, which personify 7 levels of consciousness. These sounds make one aware of the various levels of consciousness, and finally lead one to the fountain of consciousness, from where arises the stream of life which vibrates in all directions. In one direction it is called music, in another dance, in a third painting, and in a fourth poetry. There is one more form of this sound, which is called soundless sound. Insiders alone become aware of that sound, which is called anahata nada, meaning inner sound. This flows through the vocal cords and is called music. Kabir says, "O Sadhu, lift the veil of ignorance, and you'll be one with the beloved. Light the lamp of love in the inner chamber of your being, and you will meet the Beloved. There you hear the finest of all music, Anahata Nada. In the path of devotion, yogis learn to hear this soundless sound, the voice of the silence, the perennial music going on in every human heart. But how many of us hear that music? Genuine musicians overwhelmed by this parabhava, meaning ecstasy, chant the words and sing the praises of the Beloved. This devotional music has a profound influence in directing the emotional life of an aspirant towards ecstasy and enables him to enjoy the highest moment. This is called meditation in music. No self-effort is necessary, but that which does seem to be necessary in this path is to kindle a flame of love for the Beloved. The path of devotion is the simplest, and leads one to the height of spiritual ecstasy. Love, expressed through music, is meditation in music. Gradually the mind becomes one-pointed, and the day comes when the aspirant starts listening to Anahata Nada. There are numerous and inspiring sounds. With their help, the aspirant attains the highest state of joy. In the path of devotion, music becomes a means for self-realization. After playing the veena, Parvatika Maharaja went to the silence again. At the feet of the masters. I went to Kasar Devi in Almora, and there I met a well-known painter from the West, and a Buddhist monk. These people lived in a small hermitage, enjoying the Himalayan peaks in solitude. They talked to the mountains constantly, and held that the Himalayan mountains, unlike the Alps and other mountains, are not only beautiful but alive as well. They said, "We talk to the mountains, and the mountains answer." I asked, "In what sense? How can mountains talk?" They replied, "You were born and brought up in these mountains, and as always, familiarity breeds contempt. Remember that these mountains are holy, and create a spiritual atmosphere for the seeker. Their beauty is there for all who will but behold it. You have forgotten how to appreciate these gods." They went on praising the beauty of the snow-blanketed Himalayan peaks. My stay with them was brief. I soon left for Shyama Devi, which was 30 miles beyond Kasar Devi, where there lived a Swami all alone in a small Shakti temple. I wanted to be with him for a while. Soon after I arrived, Nantin Baba, a very well-known sadhu from that part of the Himalayas, joined us. I had previously lived with him in various caves in Bageshwar and Ramgarh. The Swami who lived at the Shakti temple claimed that he was a direct disciple of Sombari Baba, a well-known sage who lived 40 years earlier. During those days, Sombari Baba and Hari Khan Baba often were seen together. My master and Hari Khan Baba were disciples of the same Guru, who had been born in India, but lived mostly in Tibet. Both Hari Khan Baba and my master were called Babaji. This title of respect simply means grandfather, and is often used for very old sages. Even today, especially in Nepal, Nainital, Kashipur and Almora, everyone has some story to tell about these sages, and talks about their amazing spiritual miracles and healing powers. There is no end to the stories they tell. During our stay there, our host talked about his Guru Deva uninterruptedly for hours on end. This host was a Siddha. He was widely known for his healing powers. Whenever anyone started traveling to the Shakti temple at which he stayed, he knew it. Without being introduced to strangers, he would straightway call them by their names. He did not want to be disturbed, and sometimes he would feign anger in order to keep people away. But within, he was very soft. Villagers gave him the name Durbasa, which means foul tongue. He used to perform a primitive austerity called Panchagana Siddhi, which means having control over fires. He did both external and internal worship. He said that God is fire, and would expound on this theme at the slightest opportunity. This accomplished man gave me several lessons on solar science, which I still remember, though I did not practice what he taught me. For it is not possible to practice all these different sciences in one short lifetime. This science is helpful in healing the sick. After collecting scattered material on this subject, and learning its principles, I wanted to set up a clinic to help the suffering masses, but my master stopped me, for he felt this would distract me from an even greater purpose. Whenever I used to sing, compose a poem, or paint, he objected. He advised me to avoid such diversions, and to practice silence. He would say, "The voice of silence is supreme. It is beyond all levels of consciousness and all methods of communication. Learn to listen to the voice of silence. Rather than discussing scriptures and arguing with sages, just enjoy their presence. You are on a journey. Don't stop for long at one place and get attached to anything. Silence will give you what the world can never give you." When I left Shyama Devi, I returned to my mountain abode. The villagers of Bodha Kedar built a small stone dwelling for me, where I used to go and remain in silence. It is still there today at a height of 6,000 feet. From that dwelling I had a panoramic view of the Himalayan ranges. Occasionally the silence would suddenly be broken by a wandering yogi who would knock on my door. Only a few seekers go deep into the Himalayas. Most travelers return to the mountain roads and trails and visit the well-known shrines and places of interest, but the more serious seekers avoid these routes and visit the isolated hermitages, caves, and mountain abodes of sages. The Himalayan mountains stretch for 1,500 miles from China to Pakistan. They are the highest mountains in the world. Though there are other mountain ranges that have great beauty, the Himalayas offer one thing that is unique: the spiritual atmosphere and the opportunity to meet and learn from the highly evolved sages who make the Himalayas their home.